Hello and welcome to quiz class. Today we have 100 questions on the 1950s. Let's take a look at our quiz class awards. Let us know how you rank in the comments at the end, along with the answer to the bonus question. Which 1950s sci-fi film featured the phrase Klaatu Barada Nikto? The Day the Earth Stood Still, Forbidden Planet, or Invasion of the Body Snatchers? The Day the Earth Stood Still. What kitchen brand introduced colorful stand mixers that became a 1950s staple? KitchenAid, Sunbeam, or Hamilton Beach? KitchenAid. What country hosted the 1952 Summer Olympics? Australia, Finland, or Sweden? Finland. What was the name of the boxer who retired undefeated in 1956? Rocky Marciano, Sugar Ray Robinson, or Joe Louis? Rocky Marciano. What was the name of the policy that aimed to stop the spread of communism in the 1950s? Glasnost, Detente, or Containment? Containment. What couple was executed in 1953 for allegedly passing atomic secrets to the Soviets? Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, Klaus Fuchs and Greville Wynne, or Albrecht Ames and Robert Hansen? Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. What car model did Chevrolet introduce in 1953 that became an American classic? Mustang, Corvette, or Thunderbird? Corvette. Which Iranian prime minister was overthrown by a CIA-led coup in 1953? Hassan Rouhani, Reza Pahlavi, or Mohammad Mossadegh? Mohammad Mossadegh. Which political figure said, "We will bury you," during a UN speech in 1956? Nikita Khrushchev, Mao Zedong, or Fidel Castro? Nikita Khrushchev. What fabric was invented in the 50s and became a staple in men's suits due to its wrinkle resistance? Polyester, linen, or rayon? Polyester. What was the most popular color of lipstick among women in the 50s? Plum, red, or pink? Red. What was the average price of a gallon of gas in the United States in 1955? 59 cents, 15 cents, or 29 cents? 29 cents. Which baseball team moved from Brooklyn to Los Angeles in 1957? The Dodgers, the Yankees, or the Red Sox? The Dodgers. Which country's monarchy was abolished in 1952 after a military coup? Iran, Greece, or Egypt? Egypt. What major European treaty was signed in 1957 and laid the foundation for the modern European Union? The Treaty of Maastricht, the Treaty of Rome, or the Treaty of Versailles? The Treaty of Rome. What U.S. program in the 50s aimed to develop mind control techniques for intelligence purposes? MK Ultra, Operation Chaos, or Project Blue Book? MK Ultra. Which brand released the first disposable razor in 1956? Gillette, Schick, or Bic? Gillette. Which country dominated Olympic weightlifting in the 1950s? The United States, Germany, or the Soviet Union? The Soviet Union. Operational powered submarine was launched in 1954. Which one was it? The USS Enterprise, USS Nautilus, or USS Seawolf? The USS Nautilus. What brand introduced the first commercial electric toothbrush in 1954? Oral-B, Broxident, or Philips Sonicare? Broxident. Which playwright married Marilyn Monroe in 1956? Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, or Arthur Miller? Arthur Miller. Which 1953 film was Audrey Hepburn's Hollywood debut? Sabrina, Funny Face, or Roman Holiday? Roman Holiday. What scientific discovery did Watson and Crick make in 1953? DNA double helix, RNA sequencing, or gene editing? DNA double helix. What 1956 crisis nearly led to war between Britain, France, and Egypt? The Algerian War, the Suez Crisis, or the Iranian coup? The Suez Crisis. What 1957 event was the beginning of the civil rights movement in the U.S.? Freedom Rides, Selma March, or Little Rock 9 Crisis? Little Rock 9 Crisis. What was the most popular girl's name in the U.S. throughout the 50s? Mary, Linda, or Susan? Mary. What 1952 play by Samuel Beckett introduced the concept of theater of the absurd? The Zoo Story, The Birthday Party, or Waiting for Godot? Waiting for Godot. What novel was published in 1955 and was later banned for its controversial subject matter? Catch-22, Brave New World, or Lolita? Lolita. What 1956 science fiction film showed a civilization that was wiped out by its own technology? Forbidden Planet, The Day the Earth Stood Still, or War of the Worlds? Forbidden Planet. Which U.S. president introduced the interstate highway system in 1956? Truman, Eisenhower, or Kennedy? Eisenhower. What 1954 Supreme Court case ruled against racial segregation in schools? Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, or Loving versus Virginia? Brown versus Board of Education. What 1959 film starring Marilyn Monroe showed men dressing as women to escape gangsters? How to Marry a Millionaire, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, or Some Like It Hot? Some Like It Hot. What famous racehorse won the Triple Crown in 1957? Gallant Fox, Citation, or Swaps? Gallant Fox. Who was the U.S. Secretary of State who promoted the policy of massive retaliation in the 50s? Eric Rader, Albert Speer, or John Foster Dulles? John Foster Dulles. Which Soviet intelligence agency was officially formed in 1954? The KGB, the GRU, or the SMERSH? The KGB. What style of high heels became popular in the 1950s? Stilettos, wedges, or platforms? Stilettos. What team won the FIFA World Cup in 1958? Germany, Brazil, or Italy? Brazil. In what year was Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement launched in Cuba? 1957, 1951, or 1953? 1953. Who led the Red Scare anti-communist hearings in the U.S. during the early 50s? J. Edgar Hoover, Joseph McCarthy, or Richard Nixon? Joseph McCarthy. Which European country experienced a massive student-led anti-Soviet revolution in 1956? Czechoslovakia, Hungary, or Poland? Hungary. Which household cleaning product ran ads featuring a bald genie granting cleaning wishes? Ajax, Mr. Clean, or Lysol? Mr. Clean. Which car company introduced the first push-button automatic transmission in 1956? Chrysler, Ford, or Chevrolet? Chrysler. Which 1950s rock musician was nicknamed the Killer for his wild performances? Little Richard, Chuck Berry, or Jerry Lee Lewis? Jerry Lee Lewis. What 1958 NFL championship game is often called the greatest game ever played? Bears versus Packers, Colts versus Giants, or the Eagles versus Browns? Colts versus Giants. Which company produced the first color television set for mass consumers in the 1950s? Zenith, Motorola, or RCA? RCA. Who was the first Black artist to host their own national variety TV show in the 1950s? Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke, or Harry Belafonte? Nat King Cole. What NFL team was the first to introduce cheerleaders in the 1950s? The Baltimore Colts, the Dallas Cowboys, or the Los Angeles Rams? The Baltimore Colts. What was the first animated movie to be released in CinemaScope in the 1950s? Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, or Lady and the Tramp? Lady and the Tramp. Who was the highest paid actress of the 1950s? Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, or Grace Kelly? Elizabeth Taylor. Question 50. What was the code name for the U.S. hydrogen bomb test of 1952? Trinity, Ivy Mike, or Castle Bravo? Ivy Mike. Which toothpaste brand was one of the first to introduce fluoride in the 1950s? Colgate, Pepsodent, or Crest? Crest. Who was the biggest selling female vocalist of the 1950s? Doris Day, Patti Page, or Brenda Lee? Patti Page. Where was the armistice that ended the Korean War in 1953 signed at? Seoul, Panmunjom, or Pyongyang? Panmunjom. Which Australian tennis star won the Grand Slam, all four major titles, in 1953? Maureen Connolly, Margaret Court, or Althea Gibson? Maureen Connolly. Which East German secret police force was established in the 1950s? The KGB, the Gestapo, or Stasi? Stasi. What British novel was published in 1954 and focuses on a group of boys stranded on an island? A Clockwork Orange, Brave New World, or Lord of the Flies? Lord of the Flies. Which French cheese gained worldwide recognition after being promoted in the 50s? Brie, Camembert, or Roquefort? Brie. What Soviet spy was arrested in New York in 1957 and was later exchanged for a US pilot? Oleg Penkovsky, Rudolf Abel, or Kim Philby? Rudolf Abel. Who was awarded the 1958 Nobel Prize in Literature? Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, or Boris Pasternak? Boris Pasternak. Which former British colony officially became a Commonwealth Republic in 1950? India, Pakistan, or Malaysia? India. Question 61. What was the political scandal that led to US Vice President Nixon's Checkers speech in 1952? The McCarthy hearings, the Teapot Dome scandal, or the slush fund scandal? The slush fund scandal. Which famous French New Wave film was released in 1959? The 400 Blows, Breathless, or La Dolce Vita? The 400 Blows. What was the 1957 British nuclear test series known as? Operation Crossroads, Operation Grapple, or Operation Ivy? Operation Grapple. What dog breed became popular in the 1950s due to its appearance in Disneyland's Lady and the Tramp? Poodle, Dachshund, or Cocker Spaniel? The Cocker Spaniel. What Cold War fear led to US students practicing duck and cover drills? Paratrooper invasion, chemical warfare, or nuclear threats? Nuclear threats. Which baseball team won the most World Series titles in the 1950s? The Chicago White Sox, the Brooklyn Dodgers, or the New York Yankees? The New York Yankees. What popular 1950s soda used the slogan, "The pause that refreshes"? Coca-Cola, Pepsi, or Dr. Pepper? Coca-Cola. Which Hitchcock thriller was released in 1954 and became popular for its use of a single setting? Vertigo, North by Northwest, or Rear Window? Rear Window. What 1950s CIA-backed operation attempted to control the media? Mockingbird, Northwoods, or Bluebird? Mockingbird. Which country hosted the 1958 FIFA World Cup where Pelé made his debut? Brazil, Sweden, or Argentina? Sweden. What animal species was first cloned in 1952? Frog, sheep, or mouse? Frog. What was the most popular wallpaper pattern in 1950s suburban homes? Minimalist white on white, pixel art, or floral and pastel designs? Floral and pastel designs. What 1950s ad slogan promised that you can trust your car to the man who wears the star? Gulf Oil, Esso, or Texaco? Texaco. What was the most common phrase used in cigarette ads during the 1950s? Smoke like a movie star, doctor recommended, or healthier than ever? Doctor recommended. What 1957 movie became one of the first courtroom dramas to receive widespread acclaim? 12 Angry Men, Anatomy of a Murder, or Witness for the Prosecution? 12 Angry Men. What 1950s car model was promoted as the car designed for women? Ford Thunderbird, Dodge La Femme, or Chevrolet Bel Air? Dodge La Femme. USA was the first country to send a military satellite into orbit. In what year did they send the satellite? 1958, 1953, or 1955? 1958. Which Japanese car company produced its first ever passenger vehicle in 1952? Nissan, Toyota, or Honda? Toyota. Which French colony's war for independence began in 1954? Algeria, Vietnam, or Morocco? Algeria. What Mexican dish started becoming popular in the US during the 1950s? Quesadillas, tamales, or tacos? Tacos. Which 1957 war film was set in a Japanese POW camp and won Best Picture at the Oscars? Paths of Glory, Stalag 17, or The Bridge on the River Kwai? The Bridge on the River Kwai. Who wrote the 1951 novel The Catcher in the Rye? J.D. Salinger, John Steinbeck, or William Golding? J.D. Salinger. Who was the first host of The Tonight Show when it premiered in 1954? Jack Paar, Steve Allen, or Johnny Carson? Steve Allen. What 1950s CIA mission was called Operation Gold and tried to tap Soviet communication lines in Berlin? Berlin Tunnel, Operation Ivy Bells, or Project Azorian? The Berlin Tunnel. Which US city hosted the 1952 Winter Olympics? Oslo, Squaw Valley, or Innsbruck? Oslo. What British driver won the Formula One World Championship in 1958? Stirling Moss, Juan Miguel Fangio, or Mike Hawthorne? Mike Hawthorne. Who played the leading role in the Ten Commandments in 1956? Kirk Douglas, Charleston Heston, or Yul Brynner? Charleston Heston. Which jazz musician was known for his cool jazz style and released Take 5 in 1959? Miles Davis, Dave Brubeck, or John Coltrane? Dave Brubeck. What treaty was signed in 1951 and formally ended the U.S. occupation of Japan? The Potsdam Agreement, the San Francisco Treaty, or the Treaty of Versailles? The San Francisco Treaty. Which 1950s antibiotic started the modern era of tuberculosis treatment? Penicillin, streptomycin, or isoniazid? Isoniazid. Who performed the first kidney transplant in 1954? Christian Barnard, Rene Favaloro, or Joseph Murray? Joseph Murray. Who discovered the first artificial heart valve in 1952? Charles Hufnagel, Michael DeBakey, or John Gibbon? Charles Hufnagel. What 1954 agreement divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel? The Paris Peace Accords, the Seattle Agreement, or the Geneva Accords? The Geneva Accords. What 1950 battle was a turning point in the Korean War? The Battle of Incheon, the Battle of Seoul, or the Battle of Andong? The Battle of Incheon. Which substitute for sugar was introduced in 1958? Saccharin, aspartame, or stevia? Saccharin. Who became the first leader of independent Ghana in 1957? Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, or Jomo Kenyatta? Kwame Nkrumah. What 1950s fashion trend involved full skirts with fitted bodices? New look, pencil dress, or flapper style? New look. Who won the first ever Ballon d'Or in 1956? Ferenc Puskas, Stanley Matthews, or Alfredo Di Stefano? Stanley Matthews. What was the name of the U.S. policy introduced in 1957 to counter Soviet influence in the Middle East? Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan, or the Eisenhower Doctrine? The Eisenhower Doctrine. In 1955, which civil rights figure refused to give up her bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama? Dorothy Height, Rosa Parks, or Fannie Lou Hamer? Rosa Parks. And our bonus question, the 1954 battle that ended French colonial rule in Vietnam was called what? Let us know the answer in the comments. Also tell us how you did with our Quiz Class Einstein rewards. We'd love to know how you did. Thanks for playing this quiz, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.